right, our first item on the agenda is adoption of the agenda. If I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please.
I so move.
Thank you very much. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, thank you. That takes us to the adoption of the minutes from February 21st. If anyone has any changes or a motion to adopt the minutes.
I'll make a motion to adopt the minutes as they were printed.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins. That's a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Sisk. All those in favor, if there's no further conversation, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, that takes us on to the first and only public hearing of the night, special exception 24-02-01, Rummel Tourist Home. Mr. Curry, would you mind to cue that up for us, please?
Yes, ma'am. Chad Rummel, who owns the property at 21 Virginia Pines Lane, that's tax map parcel 1DA3 in the Wakefield district, owns this parcel that is 0.956 acres in area and is zoned residential village. The applicant has applied to operate a tourist home pursuant to Rappahannock County Code Section 17036E with special requirements in 17066K. And he would like to use this tourist home as a 3-bedroom tourist home. Virginia Pines Lane is a private lane that does appear to meet Type 2 road standards as is required by 17066K. The health department commented that septic records indicate the property is limited to a 6-person occupancy with a 900-gallon septic tank and 450-gallon per day limit. And the water well indicates the water supply, estimated at 10 gallons per minute, is adequate for maintaining the daily flow of water as long as the 6-person occupancy limit is maintained. And the health department, as they typically do, recommended that the tank be checked and pumped every 3 to 5 years. VDOT did not offer any objections to this. Staff has recommended, based on those limitations as expressed by the health department, a maximum of 3 bedrooms and 6 guests. No food service, as health department typically requests, and that the permit terminate on sale or transfer of the property, and that the property may not be subleased, rented to a third party, or used as a timeshare. Those potential conditions, if the Planning Commission is of a mind to recommend. Beyond that, I wanted to mention that uses that would normally not be allowed in a particular zoning district might be allowed through a special exception process, and that's why we're here today. That's Rappahannock County Code Section 17047. And then, most importantly, is that a special exception is only granted if the applicant can satisfy the requirements of the Rappahannock County Code, and the proposed use is otherwise lawful, and the burden's on the applicant to satisfy those requirements. That's all I've got for an intro. Happy to try to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Curry. And is the applicant present this evening? Did you want to add anything at this time? If you, I do ask that everyone that speaks, please use the microphone, just because this is transcribed later, and we want everything to be clear for the record. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the chance to talk with you tonight about this. My name is Chad. My partner Brent and I are part-time residents of Rappahannock County. We split our time between DC and here. During the pandemic, we fell in love with the Shenandoah Valley as our escape from Washington, DC, as many people wanted to escape. We fell in love with the nature, the hikes, the wineries, the restaurants, the people, and post-pandemic decided we wanted to buy out here. We knew that with our travel schedules, we both travel a lot for work, we couldn't be here full time, so we looked for a place in the Shenandoah Valley that would allow us to potentially Airbnb the place if we wanted to, after we realized we couldn't be here all that time. So Rappahannock County seemed like a natural place for us, given the county's comprehensive plan towards supporting agritourism, and we chose to buy in a community that had an Airbnb at the end of the street already, so we thought this would be a great place to do that. We've been here for 2 years, done a lot of work inside and outside on the house. We're at the point now where we feel like we want to help people enjoy the county as much as we do by using our house. Our friends are staying out here a lot more than we are now, and we can't charge them because it's not legal, so they're getting out here for free, so we thought this would be a great chance to apply for the application. We've secured the services of a nearby property manager who lives just a quarter mile away, who can be here on site if there's anything that we can't handle because we are in DC. Again, I want to stress this is meant to be a part-time opportunity for us. We're not giving up our home. We plan to still be there as much as we can. But right now, we're barely there 50 to 60% of the time and want to open it up for Airbnb opportunities for the other time. So happy to answer any questions you may have.
Commissioners, do you have anything at this time?
You did say you were gonna run it on the Airbnb,
Yes,
let them rent it out for you?
yes.
And you're there most of the time, is that correct? I mean, most of the weekends.
Right now, we're out there about 50 to 60% of the time, usually on the weekends. My partner's out here a lot more. He likes to garden and hike, and he's a sommelier, so he's out here a lot more than I am. But again, we both travel for work quite a bit, so at the most, it's 60% of the time right now that we're out here.
All right, well, we do have a public hearing scheduled, so we're going to hear from other folks, and then if we have questions, we will sure circle back to you. Thank you for that.
Just for the record, I do want to confirm that this was advertised in accordance with Code of Virginia 15.2.2204. And because the Planning Commission postponed your meeting from the 20th until today, the Code of Virginia allows you to do that and not place new advertisements in the special situation of there being hazardous weather conditions, which did exist on Wednesday, last
Thank
Wednesday.
you. Thank you.
Gary, I have one request for clarifications. I was told that some people didn't receive a notice of the hearing in the village where they live, in this area. Some of the neighbors.
With I'd have to look into the file. Code of Virginia requires adjacent landowners to be notified
for the
and
file,
not people within a certain radius. So if you have property touching this, you should have received a letter in the mail. And then I understand most of the neighbors are here, and the state code essentially states that if you're here and you didn't get a notice, well, then you figured it out and you're here and it's okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up, Ms. Ritter. And with that, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing on the special exception for the Rummel Tourist Home. At this time, if you're here to speak on this matter, please come to the microphone, address your comments to the commissioners, state your name and the district in which you reside for the record. And we ask that you keep your comments to, 3 to 5 minutes, because it looks like there's a lot of people here that wish to speak this evening. And with that, the public hearing is open. Who would like to speak?
And can I present this information?
Sure, absolutely. Please do turn it into Gary. Thank you so much.
So there's just one copy. My name is Valerie, and I'm homeowner number 37. Piedmont District, I believe, is where our homeowners subdivision is. So we are a homeowners subdivision. We're an LLC, and I've presented the articles of incorporation as well as our tax filing information.
Did you say your last name? I apologize.
I'm sorry, Von Fange, VON space FANGE.
Thank you.
And so my job back in 2015 was to incorporate the homeowners and turn it into a real entity. That was, we have to report taxes, and we could enforce whatever policies we needed to do. The first was to get the homeowners paid up, which we did. So that was one of the benefits of forming this entity. Because I was doing the books, I then got elected to be the treasurer. Makes sense, right? And then at some point, we nominated a secretary who was responsible for minutes and correspondence, setting up Zoom meetings. So we are an official homeowners association, and we were set up by a legal firm. And when word of this zoning application and what that sign meant was brought to our attention, we had barely any time to respond. There was definitely a lack of transparency, and so we immediately got together, and we had an emergency or special meeting set up for Friday, which we all met, and I have the minutes included in the documents that I handed to that gentleman. One of the items pointed up at the meeting by Mr. Rummel was that we didn't give adequate notice to have a meeting. Well, we weren't given adequate notice as to what was happening with this property. At no time were any of us told that this was going to be an Airbnb, and where our concerns were not even asked, what are your concerns? Obviously, the immediate neighbors, I'm going to let them speak to that. Some of them didn't get notification, and they are here tonight. In summary, from our meeting Friday, unanimously, we were worried about safety for our children, our guests, and our pets, okay? These are less than 1 acre lots, you guys. With that vote, we need a majority vote, which is 7 or more votes. We enacted Exhibit C, which can be modified or deleted at any other point in time. But we felt with a little bit amount of time we had to do something. And what I'm asking you is to give us time to have due process. I haven't even had a chance to talk to the legal firm that set us up because we were broadsided like a steam engine coming at us. So please give us time. If you feel that this is something that you want to approve, at least give us the time to go get legal counsel with the short notice that was put upon us. And I probably exceeded my 5 minutes, but that's pretty much what, if you guys can ask me questions, if that's what happens next.
I think we'll circle back. We want to get through the hearing at this
Okay,
time.
all
Thank
right.
you, though. I appreciate you.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
I'm reading mine because I have a, I'll never remember, that's what I'm reading.
Thank you.
So, I'm Jean Haley. We live at 32 Virginia Pines Lane and Wakefield. We're all in the Wakefield district. So, my husband and I recently came home from being on vacation and found a sign in a nearby driveway and then I looked through the newspaper and we found the ad for the tourist home application and hearing. My first thought, we have children on our street. They play out in the front yards. Our grandsons come for extended visits and they play outside. Our safe little neighborhood is never going to be the same again. We're a fairly close-knit neighborhood where people know each other and talk to each other. Neighbors help neighbors. Being the oldest residents on the street, often someone will step up and help us without being asked. We even dress up and have a neighborhood trick-or-treat out in the street with the children. Several neighbors will walk our gravel road for exercise. Jim and I often sit out on our front porch and neighbors will stop to visit. We are truly afraid that a tourist home would rob us of this closeness. Specifically, Jim and I are concerned for our safety and the safety of the children, including a special needs child who lives close by. How can we know we will be safe when different vacationers will be coming and going in and out of our community? We are concerned about problems which can arise, including excessive noise, traffic unfamiliar with the area, especially with the entrance to our street. It's at the top of 522, at the top of the county, in the mountain gap, where the fog always is, and traffic races at a high speed impatiently and illegally passing us as we turn into the entrance. I'm sure we've all had extremely close calls, and it takes practice and skill to turn in without an accident. And what if they drive to and from the winery? The entrance is only yards down 522. Exiting the winery drive and entering Virginia Pines is tricky, and while under the influence, it may be a recipe for disaster. Vacationers won't know how to deal with our wildlife, and they won't understand you can't leave anything out with bears and the bobcat, which has established its territory on our street. Our lots are less than an acre, and what is attracted in one yard is going to affect the other yard. Vacationers come to unwind and will do so late at night. They won't have regard for our neighborhood, our home. I can imagine children next door or across the street trying to get to sleep for school the next day, while the occupants enjoy the hot tub into the wee hours. We live across the street and down 2 homes from the property under consideration, and we border Chester Gap Winery. When we purchased our home 24 years ago, there were woods and a fence separating our property from a vineyard. Now it's an active winery, and last year all the woods behind our property and the fence were taken down. Our backyard is now wide open to it. It's not a stretch to think that vacationers walking over to enjoy wine there and cutting through our yard. We would be worrying about this intrusion and not able to trust that our items in our yard will be undisturbed or vandalized. Our peace of mind already has been affected by the aspect of a tourist home. We will have to start locking our doors while we're home, and don't think we will be able to happily anticipate our family visiting without possible disruption. In researching the topic, we came across many horror stories where vacationers ignore occupancy limits and rules to party and have a good time. This could happen in our neighborhood only a stone's throw away from young families. Having different vacationers who are strangers to us coming and going at all hours will alter our life. We didn't buy and settle into our home for our retirement years to lose our peace and safety. We bought it for the nice little full-time residential neighborhood it is, with good, solid, hard-working neighbors with whom we are familiar. Jim and I fear that a tourist home so close to us will be such a negative nuisance that we will lose our trust in living in our lovely neighborhood. We bought our home while we were working and looked forward to eventually leaving the rat race to enjoy a calm life here. We now fear that we may not be able to stay if our peace of mind is lost. Please recommend to deny this special exemption and leave our neighborhood as it was meant to be. And I respectfully submit by both Jim and I, Jean Haley. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Hello, I'm Stacy Strother. We all live in the Wakefield district. First of all, I would like to describe our neighborhood because we are a private lane. We are a dead-end road. We have no turnaround or thoroughway through at the end of our property. We are responsible for everything as far as the maintenance with the road and with things like our mailbox. One of my biggest concerns is the property size. We're unique to Rappahannock, I think, because we have a total of 12 homes on our road, and we are all around an acre or less in size. So we're all close proximity. I'm not totally clear on what a type 2 road is classified as, but I'm not 100% sure that our road would meet that. We have a wider entrance when we pull in from 522, but once you come around our curve, you go uphill, our road is very narrow. It's a squeeze to get past another vehicle if they're coming. We do not have shoulders once you go around that curve. Our shoulders are our yards. We do spend money at least, I think, a couple times a year on gravel replacement for our road. I know the application could stand 6 parking spaces. 6 more vehicles in and out is significant. I think VDOT said there would be no negative impact on the traffic, but I do think a possibility of at least six vehicles being at one residence on a consistent basis could be a nuisance, among many other things. With the application, it stated several times no adverse effects on the neighbors. Nobody can determine an adverse effect on us, especially when nobody contacted us to find out what our concerns may be ahead of time. We cannot predict. We can presume there may not be any adverse effects, but you cannot predict any until after the fact. We all know it's a risk either way. It does downgrade our neighborhood security and our privacy of our homes. It also can downgrade our location's value. It definitely can change the character of the neighborhood, as been described already. We have a lot of families with children, and we have a lot of grandchildren between all of us. And we are comfortable with our children out playing. We know we are close to 522. We cannot stop whoever wants to from driving in and coming into our street, our road, but we can try and do what we can to try and minimize it. And which grandchildren and children, we ultimately want to keep the neighborhood as safe as possible for the children. This may be a nuisance. We don't know that, again, if it would come to that. But we do know that guests more than likely are not going to have the same interest in the property as the homeowners do. We also do not know who a guest may bring into the home when they're staying. They may have friends in the area. We don't know how many people may be there, which can also increase our risk, our safety. I do believe I think I heard in another meeting that we had around 72 Airbnbs in the county already. I have a hard time with the fact that this would be encouraged in Rappahannock. I understand the reasonings why it would be. We have a lack of affordable housing in the county already. We have children that have grown up in Rappahannock who cannot live independently in our county unless they're living with their parents. They cannot go off to college or whatever and come back and purchase and live in Rappahannock County because of our lack of affordable housing. I don't see how increasing Airbnbs would change that for the better in any way. An adverse effect was put on us, and that was being not giving ample amount of time ahead to know this. A lot of us, speaking for myself, I'm a full-time employee, and I'm swamped at work right now. I have had some health issues in the past. I go to work, I come home, and I try to rest so that I can get up and go to work the next day. This has been a nuisance already because the lack of time to know what was going on and the stress of it and trying to be prepared to know what we can do. And I do believe that could have been avoided with some better communication. We were informed at the meeting on Friday night that this was a done deal. There is nothing we can do about it, and it's going to happen. Does that sound like a good owner of an Airbnb tourist home? Or, I mean, I don't think I have to say anything else with that. I request, we built our house in 2002 and moved in, and we have lived there ever since. I have raised my 2 children there. I have grandbabies, and with the 3rd one coming, and they're over all the time, as much as possible. I ask that this request is denied. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
My name's Rich Thiel. I'm from the Wakefield District.
I didn't get that.
Rich Thiel, Thiel. I'm from the Wakefield District. I'm basically the first person that ever moved in there. We raised our first set of kids, and we've now adopted 2 of our grandkids, and we're raising them in our house here too. I won't repeat some of the things the other people set up, but I'll try and hit some of the highlights. As other people have said here, like there's a concern with noise. A lot of people that come to Airbnbs tend to like to enjoy themselves, and I'm not one normally to say, trying to restrict somebody, but that is a fact that impacts us, right? The noise, around in the area, disturbing other people. Like, I try and I back up to the winery like Jim and Jean do too, right? So I try not to run my mower in the afternoons when they're trying to enjoy the winery down there. Right? So you try and be conscious of each other, but it's almost inevitable when you have multiple groups of people at a house, they're want to party and enjoy themselves, and not necessarily something I want to have happen. And as we know, there's no county noise ordinance. So if they do get too loud at 11, 12 o'clock at night when my kids are trying to go to sleep, I can't call the sheriff's office and say, hey, can you come tell them to quiet down? There's no way to do that, okay? So that's one of my concerns. Several people mentioned about, safety. It would be increased traffic, especially if people are coming up for the weekend, multiple groups of people, then driving out and coming back in. Like people said, it's a gravel road, and I think everybody knows gravel roads do wear down over time. We have to buy gravel every time. It has a sharp corner where if you go too fast, it gets potholed and stuff, right? So we're having to fill the potholes, and I just concerned that additional traffic will wear the road down. And it's not a county road, so it falls on us to pay for this extra gravel and to maintain this road, or to pay our guy who maintains the road for us, hey, can you fill in the potholes again? So these are expenses that fall onto us. And we do have a problem with that road, with especially FedEx and the UPS trucks, and sometimes other people drive too fast on the road. We have a 10-mile-an-hour sign, but still, the FedEx guys, they're in a hurry. They fly down the road. And gentleman right here, he sits at the corner. He's usually out there yelling at them, right, to, hey, slow down, right? But it's kind of dangerous. So again, the concern is you got people coming from other places. They're not used to. I'm sorry, I don't mean to country thing, but country living. I'm city. I need to get somewhere. I need to get to that next winery. I got dinner down at the inn, or something, right? So we don't want people flying down around through here, because again, the kids around, right? Just concern is too is what's the Airbnb impact on the subdivision's home values, right? And my thought is I'm a legal person, but if you let one in, can suddenly as others come in and say, well, you did one, why can't we do another one, yet another one? And then soon all these houses are not Airbnbs. That's just, not what I wanted, not what I'd like to see. Like you said, he mentioned about there's another B&B. It's not actually in the subdivision. You can't access from the road, because our road is a dog leg and it dead ends. But just on the other side, for that winery, they bought that property and it is an Airbnb. And unfortunately, the other gentleman that's here would tell you, he often has noise complaints about that house right there. Because there's people there for the winery having a good time. They're up late and just making noise. So some of us neighbors have already experienced some of the problems with an Airbnb on the other side of us, but you can see the house, right? It's pretty close. So it's not in the subdivision, but it's right across. So we've already experienced some. I think that's where some of the apprehensions come from. That's my main statement, so I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
My name is Jim Haley. I'm representing our neighbor, Scott Schlosser, who was unable to be here tonight. Members of Rappahannock County Planning Commission, the residents at 21 Virginia Pines Lane is applying for a zoning change to allow tourist home permit. I have many concerns about the zoning variance. My wife and I have lived at 36 Virginia Pines Lane for 30 years. It is a peaceful and quiet neighborhood with 1-acre lots, which makes the homes fairly close to one another, in many cases less than 100 feet. Approximately 4 years ago, the adjoining property on our north parcel was turned into a VRBO, 4619 Remont Road. The house on the property is 20 feet from our property line. Some renters are quiet, and some are not so quiet. It is difficult to know who is going to rent a property and what actions they may have. Noise from guests is sometimes a problem. There is additional traffic in and out of the VRBO home for cleaning, maintenance, management, etc. While this traffic utilizes the access road from Chester Gap Cellars, the parking area is very near our property line. In trying to be a good neighbor and friend to our owner, we try to make it work. However, having a new renter on a frequent basis is very different than a permanent neighbor. Besides additional traffic and noise, we have experienced another problem. We have a 5-foot tall wooden fence around our property, in addition to invisible fencing for our dog. A while back, one of the VRBO renters yelled at me as I was walking across the yard and complained that my dog would not come over so they could pet him and give him treats. I was not comfortable with the situation and began locking the gates and the fence. There will be situations such as this that will arise and will be difficult to foresee. Lastly, Virginia Pines Lane does not meet the requirements for a Tier 2 road. The road has a minimal gravel base and does not have a 6-inch crown. The road is basically flat, and in one place, the sides are higher than the center. Additional traffic will not help the condition of the road, and described above where all the traffic will increase with renters and other supporting services. In closing, I have outlined several impacts that are viewed as negative with the zoning application. Fox Pines subdivision is classified as a residential village where the homes are relatively close together, where noise and additional traffic will be noticed and negatively affect the quality of the neighborhood. I urge the Planning Commission to decline the zoning variance. Respectfully, Scott Schlosser. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
He makes the road.
I know who Scott Slaughter
Scott
is.
knows what he's doing.
Don't you worry. He's also one of my son's teachers at the high school. Anyone else wishing to speak?
My name is Brian Oakland. I'm at 18 Virginia Pines Lane. Brian Oakland, O-K-L-A-N-D. I'm at 18 Virginia Pines Lane. I am directly across the road from Mr. Rummel. I'm going to keep this brief, and I've just got some fundamental concerns. Our neighborhood is not the proper environment for an Airbnb as far as I'm concerned. It's been zoned as a residential village for a reason. So, secondly, Mr. Rummel at no point that I'm aware of ever made contact with the homeowners association concerning application. And people have already voiced that concern to me. It ends up being a red flag. So, we just learned about this less than 2 weeks ago. We got a letter in the mail. We're one of the adjacent property owners. So, yeah. That's what I said. So, but again, and I think being right across the street, could be impacted with any negligence the clientele might incur. So, and finally, as residents, I think we have a right to oppose this variance, and it appears that the majority of our homeowners around here do. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, you can just get both the Oaklands in one fell swoop here. I'm Kim Oakland. I obviously live at 18 Virginia Pines Lane, directly across from the property, being considered for a variance this evening. My husband and I have lived at this property for 19 years, and Fox Pines is a very small residential subdivision, as everyone has said, consisting of one gravel street and 12 houses. This is not a large subdivision. It's one street, which, from everything I've heard, and if Scott Schlosser says it doesn't meet the requirements for that classification of road, I trust him because he does his homework. It's not a gated community. but it is a community. We've got people with small children, people with grandchildren. We've actually often joked at our homeowner association meeting that we have a road maintenance organization, not an HOA, because none of us wanted the type of HOA that told people what they could and couldn't do with their property. But we have an HOA. Unfortunately, because of this variance application, we've now had to add this clause prohibiting short-term rentals. Nobody back in the 90s would have thought we'd be here with, making these requests. And I appreciate the fact that Mr. Rummel wants to utilize his property for income. He bought it at the peak of the real estate boom. I'm sure he can't sell it for any kind of profit now. But our neighborhood isn't designed for any sort of short-term tourist rental or long-term tourist rental, to be perfectly honest. People have already talked about safety, maintenance costs. All of those are true. But the other thing I want to tell you is this property has an in-law suite in the basement. So while it may say on the application 3 bedrooms, this has the potential to be rented as 2 different rentals. It was, at one point before Mr. Rummel ever bought it, there were people living in it that rented out the in-law suite. So that's my big concern. And like everyone else, and I know that Chad feels like we're ganging up on him, and I guess in some respects we sort of are, because it's 11 houses out of 12 that want it, or that don't want the short-term tourist rental. But it's not Mr. Rummel, it's the tourist rental that we don't want. And the transparency has been huge. That's a huge issue. I think communication is key, and unfortunately, there wasn't very good communication on the part of Mr. Rummel or the county, quite frankly. We are an adjacent property. Yes, we got a letter. We got a letter the Thursday before the meeting was scheduled. It's Thursday or Friday in the mail. It was not dated, had no idea when it was sent, nothing. So.
Thank you very much.
My name's Walter Russell. I live in the Wakefield district. I'm the house directly adjacent to the tourist home application on 15 Virginia Pines Lane. I'm probably one of the newer residents in the neighborhood. I bought my property approximately 4 years ago. If there was an Airbnb next door to me, I wouldn't have bought the property. My back porch, where I sit constantly, my family sits, enjoy dinners on our covered back porch, is less than 20 yards from the back deck with the hot tub that he has built on his property. We have no fence between our property. I'm concerned about the same things everybody else is. The effect on the neighborhood, the roads driving by. I'm concerned that people may miss his property and turn into mine because I'm directly adjacent to him. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I am opposed to having an Airbnb directly next door to me, and concerned about how it would affect if I needed to sell my property. It could negatively affect that value for me. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name's Nicole Hamback, and I live at 27 Virginia Pines Lane. You will see my name listed on his application as an adjacent property. And I do want to note that I was not given any notice nor a letter in the mail. Now, that could be a mail issue, so I'm not blaming the county, but I do want to note that the only reason why I was aware was I came home and saw the sign at the end of the driveway and did my own research. I do want to preference that in general, my husband and I are not necessarily against tourist homes, and we don't typically like to tell people what to do with their property. But because this home is exactly beside mine, we do want to list our concerns. My neighbors have voiced their concerns, and I share in those. I don't want to take up your time, but I'll just list my two biggest concerns. As mentioned, we're all on 1 acre lots. Again, my home being directly adjacent to his. Due to the proximity of our home, we are, of course, worried about noise and the general annoyance that will arise from people coming and going right next to us. I feel that we will lose our sense of home security and privacy. I took a few minutes to look at the websites of tourist homes in our county, and most of them are secluded, wooded, and private. This is not that. I ask that you please keep in mind how close this home is to not only my family, but others. Their driveway and property line sits just a few yards from my children's swing set. My second and biggest concern is, of course, my children's safety. I have 2 young children, 10 and 6. As a parent, I am not naive that we are raising our children in a very different and more dangerous world. And as much as we try, we cannot protect our children from all the dangers that linger. But what I can do is show up tonight and express my concern on their behalf. As parents, we already have a long list of anxieties to worry about. My oldest is aging out of after-school care and will soon be riding a school bus home by herself. That's already worrisome enough, but to worry about strangers right next door every week is not a desire I wish to have. And that's really all you guys have heard it all tonight. In closing, I want to note that our desire to not have a tourist home in our neighborhood isn't personal towards Chad or Brent, and that I hope that regardless of the outcome, that we will all remain kind, thoughtful neighbors. My community and I hope that you will take our concerns seriously when making your decision this evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nicole. Anyone else wishing to speak?
My name is Karen Hunt, and I live in Jackson District. I was just listening to what was said, and I had a couple of things I wanted to point out. One, I read in the application, and I heard again tonight here by the applicant that the belief that this somehow fits our comprehensive plan for agritourism, which I'm sure you guys all understand is not accurate, but I just wanted to make that point. The other point for some people who may be newer to this process is this is not a done deal tonight. The Planning Commission will make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, but it is the Board of Supervisors who will decide this. There are concerns about the road suitability and whether it is or is not a Type 2 standard, so I think it bears merit that that question needs to be answered. There's clearly significant neighborhood concern. There's been an issue raised about proper notification of an adjacent property owner, and you hear a lot of concerns with small lots and proximity. So I would that's what I hear, and just wanted to give you a summary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
My name is Christopher Smith. I'm at 6 Virginia Pines in the Wakefield district. Actually, when I just found out about this when everyone else did, and we had this kind of emergency Zoom meeting called for our neighborhood, and I was going into it, with very few concerns, and I was actually ready to be like, yeah, this is fine. And Chad had actually written an email kind of addressing some of our issues that we had, and I thought it was a very thoughtful email. But then seeing through the course of that meeting everyone's concerns and just realizing how much our neighborhood, though we don't, talk together every day, we are very much concerned with each other, and I've seen that play out over my 15 years there. So I do think that it is very valid that we consider this neighborhood as kind of a special place in Rappahannock. There aren't many places like it. And even if the letter of the law said this was fine, this is just a different place with different sized lots. And there are so many concerns that have been laid out here tonight that I do agree with generally, but I'd just like you to seriously consider that this is a special place within the county. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, going once. Anyone else wishing to speak? That would be wonderful. Thank you, Nicole.
Sorry about that. I only have one copy and I need this one.
If there's no one else that wishes to speak, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. At this point, I would look to my fellow commissioners, or if there's anything that the property owner would like to add at this time.
Wow. My neighbors have spoken a lot about the bad sides of Airbnb in general. Some are specific to our neighborhood, but many are specific to Airbnbs in general. The county has endorsed Airbnbs in several places. So some of those points about safety and concerns are just generally Airbnb things. As we pointed out, it's not a gated community already, so issues of safety could already be happening. But keep in mind that an Airbnb person puts down their social security number, their driver's license, their credit card, and several $100s. So they're not going to come in and do all that to steal a pet when they could just drive down the road and steal a pet. Not to say it's not a valid concern, but in general, that's a concern of Airbnbs, not my specific home. I did want to address Kim's comment about the in-law suite. I invite you over. It's no longer an in-law suite.
Please address your comments to the commissioners and not to the members of the audience.
Commissioners, I would invite anybody to come see that it's no longer an in-law suite. It's actually a family room downstairs that was eliminated. It needed to be completely gutted, and it's now just a family room. So it's not a separate in-law suite as it was before. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. You might want to stick close to the microphone in case there's questions. Ms. Ritter?
Yeah.
Do you want to go first?
So I drove up there, and it's a lovely neighborhood, and the houses are close together, and I have no ability to judge whether it's a road that meets the requirements of, road number 2. It's pretty wide. I mean, for a neighborhood compared to some of the ones in Chester Gap. And it's much more drivable. So I got to tell you guys have done a great job. It seems to me that there's got to be a way of accommodating everybody's concerns here that I'm wondering whether or not there could be an agreement of, what might work for you all. Like, would it be restrictions on numbers of people? I mean, it's not, you can make it so it's not any more traffic than exists now with the existing tenants. Could have a requirement that there be no noise after a certain time. I'm just wondering whether or not there's some way that you all can come to an agreement. Sure.
After our meeting on Friday night, in the flat-out disrespect of all of our opinions, I, for one, don't see any compromise. I'm at 12 Virginia Pines Lane, Daniel Straw.
Also, is it our
If you don't mind, I'm so sorry. The person that writes our minutes will thank you later.
I'm Gwen Schaefer from 10 Virginia Pines Lane. We've been there ever since 2003. My husband found the house when we moved from Pennsylvania. Anyway, he fell in love with it, and I love it too. So, and the neighbors are nice and everything. My concern is the safety concern of everybody, the kids, the traffic, and the road, and everything. And our own house, because we have a couple dogs. My son moved in with us, and he has a dog and a couple dogs. But still, it's the Airbnb is commercial. No commercial things should be up in that neighborhood. We are residential for people just to live there. Residential. It should not be commercial. And I agree with everybody here. And I don't. I'm sorry. That's how I feel about it. And I say no, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we did close the public hearing, and I think it is healthy to hear a little bit from people from time to time. But to have a back and forth all night, we can't do that. We'll never get through this item of business, and I know we all want to get through this item of business. You know what this reminds me of, Steph? It reminds me of the Blossom Lake Lane
Yeah, no,
application from the BZA, or the applications that we've heard from Rappahannock Lake.
That's right.
Where it is a small community and people share a common road and have a common interest. And there is a lot of concern that something like an Airbnb will take that property out of sync with the neighboring properties.
Right, and Rappahannock Lakes, they're even closer together.
Yeah, and I believe our recommendation to them, and I'm glad you all have taken the first steps. I don't know that Rappahannock Lakes has, but we always recommend to them, if they truly don't want Airbnbs in their subdivision, to write it into their bylaws. So it sounds like you all are working on that.
And he pointed out that we missed the 10-day minimum of having a meeting, but we didn't have 10 days to even get 10 days notice.
Yeah.
So if things aren't going to happen tonight, we still have that option to basically solidify Exhibit C, which you all have, which says no short-term rentals. We unanimously agree on that. And I would think that as an LLC, we should have some rights. I have not reached out to our legal firm.
You mentioned that in your comments, and I hate to keep interrupting people, but we do need to deliberate as a commission. So, yes, Tommy?
I was, as I look at this, especially in the Rappahannock County Code, I know we've had a bunch of Airbnb things come up towards homes. And I can't speak to the road, I mean, especially after VDOT says they're good with it. I mean, they're obviously more of an authority on it than I am. But when I look at the Rappahannock County Code section number 4, clearly states in agricultural and conservation zones that for 10 and 20 acres for tourist homes. I know I personally have voted against things with 2 acres or less. So based on that, and based on the fact that I try to be consistent, and being this is a residential, village residential, I mean, my vote's gonna be no to deny it. So nothing personal. I wish welcome to the county, but I've been up there. I know it's a smaller area, and I know how working the sheriff's department, how libations can enhance noises in that close proximity. I would not be in favor of it. That's my take.
Thank you. Ms. Ritter, did you have additional comments on that?
No, I'm going to wait and hear what you.
Okay.
Yes, when I was reviewing this application earlier, right in the beginning, this less than an acre lot, 0.9 something. To me, a 3-room short-term rental does not belong on that size acre lot. It needs to be a commercial. It's the same thing as if you was to have a 3-room mini motel. It does not belong in the village residential area. And earlier, I know we spoke about the benefits that this would bring to Rappahannock County. I don't see why it's bringing any benefit, other than a little bit of taxes, and we have a big-time problem of getting the tax money from the Airbnbs, big-time problem. So, but all of what I see from up on Chester Gap is going to go to Warren County. It's going to go to Front Royal. They have the Melting Pot, which is the best pizza within 200 miles of Chester Gap. They've got Martin Grocery. They got ABC stores. And I don't know if this winery is in Rappahannock or is in Warren County. Okay. So I see little to nothing in the way of revenue coming into Rappahannock County to help us. I certainly don't see no jobs coming to Rappahannock County. Those jobs are over in Warren County. You know, and we've got enough problems with getting our tax dollars here. I don't have anything against Warren County, but we need our tax dollars in this county to help us out. So, and I truly hear these people's concerns here tonight, because I personally would not want, if I lived in a subdivision, and this is a true subdivision up there, and they are close-knit family, because when I went up there to review it with my wife, I drove slowly down the road. I went all the way to the end, so I had to back up and turn around. I don't know which one, it may have been one of you gentlemen was there. He constantly watched me, and I was beginning to tell my wife, I don't know if we're gonna get out of here or not. So, but he didn't make no advances on me, so I did get out safely. But they are a close-knit family, and but again, to close my point on it, I would not, personally myself, I would not want to live in a subdivision to where I'm gonna have a short-term rental beside me, coming in constantly with different people, and you can say you take their driver's license and everything. They don't guarantee what they do. It does not guarantee anything. And we know we got some good people in this country. We got some bad people in this country. And I would not want my grandchildren to be raised around a short-term rental. So my answer to this is definitely a no.
Thank you, Tommy. Mr. Light?
Thank you. I really have to commend the community. Rarely have I seen such a turnout, and I think it's indicative. I think we all have our kind of personal views on Airbnb, and I don't know that those are relevant, and I think our code is what our code is. But the general standards do require that we consider whether the proposed use, which is not allowed by right, would be disruptive of the nature of the current community, and I think that's clearly the case here. It's much more open. We have approved some others on small, or recommended approval of others on small lots. The fact that the homeowners association has gotten together, whether they abided by their own rules or not, doesn't particularly pertain to us. It's an indication of the community's perception of itself. And if they're inclined to give up that right as a community, I don't think it should be up to us to enable that to be undermined by our action. So at a minimum, I think we should table it in time for them to get their act together and shore it up, or I would also support recommending denial with no personal animosity or concern about Airbnbs in general.
I'm of a similar mind, reviewing the application, and I'm trying to refresh my own memory about the Blossom Lake Lane that went on to the BZA, but that's the most similar application that I can think of.
And that was actually denied. We'd sent it over with conditions.
You know, the recommendation from this body was to restrict it to, I think, 2 people with children. So basically, you know, the idea of one
Like
car,
family
one
equivalent.
family, similar impact as would generally be felt by a single-family residential home. Right. But it was denied ultimately at the BZA.
And if I remember correctly, the BZA's reason for denial was was basically the first general standard. The proposed use was such that it was going to adversely affect the neighborhood.
Yeah, and of course that applicant was renting it out before they got their permission, and that didn't help them at all.
That's true.
And they had large groups, and all the fears that have been expressed were experienced at that location.
That is true. And then I guess my other concern with it being a small lot And of course, the elevation that's at play for anything that you do in Chester Gap. It makes screening very challenging because it's hard to screen to those kind of heights to where it can't be seen from somewhere. And the way that, like so many other parts of the county, noise carries due to the inclines as well. I know that the close proximity and the physical terrain there would make it very difficult to strain and to screen and keep quiet. So those are all very valid concerns in my opinion.
If it would be okay, I'd like to speak to the road standard
Yes, sir.
very quickly. It does require a crown. I have not inspected this road. Ms. Summers looked at it, I guess from width. I don't know if she measured a crown or not in the area between the residence and the road. If it doesn't in fact have a crown, it would not meet the type 2 standard. Therefore would not be eligible unless a crown were established.
Well, we have approved similar tourist homes in Chester Gap, which is not dissimilar, but nobody came, none of the neighbors came to make any remarks on either pro or against, as I recall. And it does seem that people have a strong feeling of neighborhood. I'm not sure if you restrict the number of people who are using the Airbnb to the same number of people who would be using it for Mr. Rummel and his partner, then I don't know whether that might help in terms of the neighborhood. If it's just a couple of people who are renting it, it doesn't seem to me to have that much of an impact. But it's certainly no more impact in terms of the road and the number of people than Mr. Rummel and his partner. I don't know how you can, I guess you can ensure that people who are renting for Airbnb are not going to go and drink and make noise. I don't know how you restrict that. So, the safety issue, I'm not sure I entirely, if you have two people or two people and a child, I'm not sure that really represents an issue of a problem with safety, but I don't know if that's what I'm trying to figure out what the exact fear is.
If I may, if the applicant wishes to come back with a different proposal, I suppose we would consider that as a different proposal, but I don't know that it's
I'm fishing around for a way of getting
rewrite it.
Yeah.
And I would also note, I think there are some differences. The other small lots were not on a single private road with a homeowners association up in Chester Gap. I mean,
that's true.
And in places like Sperryville, where it's an organic community that has developed, and you already have some commercial, I think the expectation is quite different than when you have a built-out 12-home private development that has an association. I think the community aspects of it are pretty different than anything else we've seen, especially when you consider the lack of vegetation and the proximity of the houses. So, to me, this is in no way inconsistent with the thinking that we've applied to other similar applications.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we deny this application here. It does not meet the comprehensive plan because it does adversely affect the residential neighborhood.
All right, so what I'm hearing is a recommendation for denial for Mr. Atkins based on the impacts to the residential neighborhood. Is that correct? That's the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Sisk. I would ask for a friendly amendment to your motion that we request staff to check the road standard and see if it is indeed a type 2 road standard or if it's not in compliance for a type 2 road standard.
I'll agree to amend it to that result.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sisk, is that agreeable to you?
Yes, ma'am, I'll second.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further conversation? All right. So with that being the motion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. Thank you. That will go up to the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation for denial. You're welcome to stay for our additional work, or you're welcome to leave at this time.
Will we be notified when that meeting is?
Should be the May meeting, the Board of
It
Supervisors.
should be May 6th,
May 6th, okay.
but the answer is yes. And Ms. Handback, are you at PO Box 314?
Is it possible for the LLC to be mailed
Full?
as well? We never got notification. Can you mail the LLC? You can find
Let's take a brief recess.
So we're going to mail who the law requires us to mail to. We will post the sign, and we will place it on the website, and we will put it in the newspaper.
Okay, I'll find in, I'll look into that.
And I'll go ahead and call the meeting back to order. I had thought we would probably, the next item on the agenda is public comment. Anyone who is wishing to speak at this time, please make your comments at the microphone.
Anita Ramos, Hampton District. An interesting night. But a few things that keep coming up when there actually are people that come here to speak is they're concerned about safety. They're concerned about the dangerous roads, et cetera, et cetera. Perhaps Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors might ask our sheriff to come to some meeting and kind of sum up the kind of complaints they have or haven't gotten, the kind of accidents they may have heard about. They have a feel for this. I realize that we don't have a noise ordinance, and it's hard to come up with one anyway. I've been through that in Fairfax. Sorry, that was a dirty word I used. But anyway, I think it would be good to get a handle on reality, because I wonder about the reality of people worried about safety, etc. I mean, anything can happen in this world, I admit. But I just wonder, because I don't know about you guys, but I don't hear anything about the tourist homes being a big problem. But I'm sure some of them have been and are. But anyway, just to get an idea. And the other thing is about the notices. As Mr. Curry has said, there's a state rule about giving notices to adjacent landowners. And then they tell you that they got them late, et cetera, et cetera. I just been on the phone today for 20 minutes talking to my mortgage company and saying, why did my check take 19 days to clear? And they says, oh, you're fine. There's nothing wrong. And I'm still trying to figure out why it took them that long. But anyway, it might be a good thing to, and of course they blame the post office in a way, but never quite. But anyway, so I think maybe if the state law says we have to have notices at a certain amount of time ahead, perhaps we ourselves can extend that some more. And people applying for these things, it can take longer. This is one of the things about, we have to move things along for people, etc. But, if they have to wait another month because neighbors have to be told, then that's the way it has to be, just so they don't feel like they've been left out. But, you all did, from what I understand, you all do things according to Hoyle. So I'm not worried about what you're doing, but other people don't interpret it that way sometimes. And so if they feel like they're being railroaded, let's try to find a way so it seems like it isn't. And it's a lesson for people in vigilance. of paying attention to what's going on. No matter what's going on in your personal life, you need to know what's going on around you. And I think the sign helped as much as anything, which is the good news. And we didn't do signs for 1 billion years, and so you can see how it pays off. But you know, honestly, when I drove up there, the sign is really obvious. I mean, unless you live farther down the hill, you can see that. I mean, it's really obvious. So anyway, those are my 2 suggestions about notices and about, hearing from the sheriff and finding out, are there big problems or are there not? That's the big thing. And I know that the Airbnb people and the VBO, whatever, that they all have pushed for, no parties and things like that as part of the deal with the people that do the rentals. And so they, on a national scale, are trying their best to set things up a little better or make it easier for the owner to toss people out if they are a problem, or for the local authorities to toss them out. And maybe we need to find out a little bit more about that. So anyway, those are my thoughts. It seems to be that this kind of neighborhood is a little awkward, but it's not impossible in comparison to some other places in the world that have these things. So let's see how it works.
I think one of the reasons that we don't hear much about problems with the tourist homes, because by far the majority of ours are on 10 to 20 acre lots.
But still, sound carries. I mean, we question the orchard people down on 522 because they were saying they have music sometimes, and people said they heard it. Well, I can tell you in Fairfax, I mean, I've heard the guns at Quantico, so.
2 strikes in
I said that dirty word again, I'm sorry. But really, and people sometimes, I'm on next door sometimes there and reading, and people are going, I heard loud guns somewhere, and we're all, the rest of us are going, it's Quantico, it's just the way the wind blows or the air is on a particular day.
But their complaint about the loud music down on 231, that was an invalid excuse. Because you can go out down there anytime at night. You can hear the cows bellowing. Now, are we going to be able to stop the cows? No.
No. North of the fox sounding like a screaming person, which a lot of people don't understand, and some of us know very well. So anyway, that's my thoughts. Tommy Sitchkin was just saying that he's responded to noise complaints up.
And it varies, but there's really nothing you can do. I know people don't want to hear that, but there's very, very little you can do.
Yeah.
It's different if the vehicle or the person is within sight of a public highway, but that's a private lane.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no cause for even drunken public, because that's not public, that's private.
Mm-hmm. So people need to understand those, that's the deal, and it could be your neighbor, much less be a guest, so to speak.
Mr. Curry, most as far as when you look at Sperryville, or maybe Mr. Black, I'm sorry, when you look at Sperryville, there's some, it's already an established thing there. Well, this is all residential homes.
Oh, yeah.
And then where do you stop? If this one can go in at less than an acre, then the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next. So then you have 12 houses and less than 12 acres that are all Airbnb.
It is difficult, and there's another point there. Do you want to get the zoning changed so that you can't have an Airbnb in a residential village situation or properties under an acre, which that barely is. It's things like that.
And it's what is this, a special exception? I mean, you can do it, doesn't mean you have to do it.
Mm-hmm. Right. So. Well, anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Julie, you got anything? No. All right, with that, I'll close the public comment, and that takes us to the Berkeley group discussion. Mr. Curry, I think you've gotten comments back or a revision back from the Berkeley group.
Yeah, so, let's try to rewind the clock here a little bit. We've received a few different iterations from the Berkeley group. I shared the most recent version with the joint bodies when you met, whenever that was.
January?
Probably wrote it in. And so when up till now, I've not performed any inline track changes to any of Berkeley Group's documents. I've taken their documents and passed them along with their track changes as well as clean, and then just added some margin comments that were more general, which was more of a highlight to the Planning Commission and the board and direction to the Berkeley Group on conceptual type things that I thought were appropriate to change and that I used as a guide to discuss the matters with the Planning Commission and the board. So the Berkeley Group has now addressed all of those items, all the margin comments, a few different times. And this most recent pass back, they sent me the entire ordinance, both tracked and clean. And what you have attached is their red line as they sent it to me, which is basically a Christmas tree. There's just colors everywhere, and I find it very distracting. We don't want to bury it and hide it. It just is hard to read and follow and track. Also, what you have attached is my tracked changes of the first half of their latest document. Just where a citizen can track back and find out where this authority exists. And goes through the process. So then when you get to criminal penalties, so if civil penalties exceed $5,000, then you automatically jump up. And then all these dollar amounts, they're all driven by code, state code. So that's...
And the time limitations are also state codes. For instance, I'm just trying to figure out, so if I'm in violation, I get the notice, I then don't do anything, and then I get a penalty of $200, and then 10 days later I can get...
Yeah, they says each day is a new violation, but you can't have a penalty any more frequently than every 10 days. And that's just what the state code says.
That's what I was...
Maybe that came in an iterative process where, they said, okay, it's $200 a day, and then the General Assembly came back after having people yell at them and say, wait a minute, this number gets really big really fast, and they said, oh, every 10 days. I'm not sure how it came to be. But yeah, it's interesting how the wording works out that way. So this is the civil penalties. I think it will be very helpful for us to avoid tying up
it's a
court,
great idea.
and it just should make things easier. I think that section is generally fine and doesn't require a whole lot more tweaking to be in close to a final form. And the next article is permits, and so that article is administration. And so the structure again is we have all of chapter 170, and then 170 is broken up into articles. And we've been reviewing 1, 2, 3, and 9, where there have been a lot of changes. So 1 is general, 2 is administration. So within the articles we have divisions, and so this is kind of the structure, so to try to keep things tidy in the document rather than having to just find something in the middle of 50 sections. You have this structure. So within administration, we were just talking about Division 4 enforcement. So then if we skip down to Article 3, permits and applications, it runs through all the different types of applications that we can have here and what documents are needed and the process you need to follow, etc. And probably the easiest way for me to do this is go back to the table of contents. And so if we look at Division 3, that's the conditional zoning. This section still needs some work. And I didn't do the work right now, I did some research. So in Virginia, conditional zoning, our authority to have conditional zoning and have proffers, it varies by county based on growth in the county or growth in adjacent counties. And so generally, our county does not have high growth. So we would not necessarily be allowed to invoke some of the sections that would allow cash proffers or off-site transportation proffers. However, the Code of Virginia also says if you have 3 adjacent counties with greater than 5% decennial growth, you can do that. And so I would think we would want to stake out for ourselves the ability to do that. The language that is presented is too broad and not clear in that regard. And so it just needs to be cleaned up to make it clear the code sections that we would be following. So 2298, 15.2-2298 would be the section that talks about the 3 adjacent counties, and we could do that. There's also this 15.2.2303, which says if you're a Northern Virginia county, you can do special things. But then 2298 says if you have 3 counties, you can also do the 2303 version. And so I'm not entirely clear the total differences and pros and cons between the 2303 version and the 2298 version. And we need some guidance on which route we are going to take. And we have to stake out which route we are going to take in the ordinance. The 2297 version is the low growth, you can't do a lot of things, and we don't want to do that.
Right.
I know that's kind of confusing, but.
Well, I have a general question. Low growth gives you more authority to restrict?
Low growth gives you less authority. It does not allow you to collect cash proffers. It doesn't allow you to require off-site transportation improvements.
Okay.
Right? You're doing a subdivision down the road. I can't make you change the intersection away from your property.
Because it's a low growth.
Yeah, but if you're in a high growth community, you can require those
Or if
things.
you have high growth around you. So by whatever degree this clear language would provide, we have more.
Right. So Culpeper, Fauquier, Warren each meet the threshold, and therefore we're in the unique condition where we are eligible to do those things that are laid out in 2298 or 2303, but we have to adopt an ordinance that says we are. And our ordinance right now doesn't mention any of those. But we would want to reference one of those, and we just need to talk to somebody who's been in this game a lot more than me.
So,
And that might be a Berkeley.
as an example, let's say Flint Hill suddenly takes off and there's a subdivision. The question is whether or not you can have one of those, like, traffic circle things.
Well, let's look at it, think of it in the context of this 50-foot right-of-way thing. And so say there was a parcel down Crest Hill Road, and Crest Hill Road may be 40-foot right-of-way from 522 to wherever this entrance to the subdivision is. So if you can require off-site transportation improvements, you can say, yeah, you can do this project if and only if you extend the right-of-way from your project to 522 and make the road better. If you were not a high-growth locality or weren't adjacent to high-growth localities, you couldn't do that. You couldn't require that in exchange for a rezoning. And that's what we're talking about here. In exchange for a rezoning, these were reasonable requirements that would offset the impacts of that rezoning. So we don't do a lot of residential rezoning, but I think it's always good to have the tools in the toolbox if they're legally available to us. I mean, I guess one could say, we don't want to have the authority, and then we'll just say no.
Yeah, that's not quite the answer,
But-
yeah. I mean, it gives us authority to approve with restrictions more development, which I guess is the
Yeah, now,
question I was asking, because
the
they're
cash proffer side of things, that speaks to, you're going to add X number of homes, that's gonna put a strain on our school, and there needs to be a nexus for the dollar, but, you know, $10,000 per home to help with a capital improvement at the school or a playground to support your increase. We could not do that if we weren't adjacent to high-growth areas and didn't reference it in this section. So the big picture is this section needs to get cleaned up to make sure that's perfectly clear. Now, the public, ultimately through public hearings and the board, will have to decide, do we really want to include in our ordinance this authority to do cash proffers and off-site improvements, or do we not? And so you don't have to, you have the opportunity to because of where we sit relative to those three counties. That's the only big picture thing that I found that still needed work from the Berkeley group so far.
Well, then if someone wants to proffer something else, can they just do it automatically now?
Well,
Or does this
so
help?
the
structure to
section
other
also
things?
cleans up, I'm just speaking to that big picture that needed work. What this also does, in the new wording in 17051, standards and procedures, it talks through the process a little bit. Then it has a very clear proffer statement that basically says, each proffer made in connection with this application for rezoning was made voluntarily and complies with applicable law. No agent of the county has suggested or demanded a proffer that is unreasonable under applicable law. The development and or use of the subject property of this application shall be in strict accordance with the conditions set, unless blah, 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 blah. So, there's also, if you read down through, the proffers made have to be as a result of an impact analysis the applicant developed. So we're not demanding anything other than applicant, you develop an impact analysis. You tell us what impact your project is going to have on our community. Then you can link a proffer to the impact that you have devised and foreseen based on your project. And so they do the analysis, they do the proffer. You and the Board of Supervisors ultimately look at the impact analysis in the proffer and decide whether A, the impact analysis truly represents reality, predicted reality, and B, whether the proffer mitigates that impact. And if you don't think it does, then you vote no. And if you think it does do it, then maybe the proffer is acceptable and the rezoning is good or bad for some other reason.
But if you didn't have this section, somebody who wished to subdivide could neither make a proffer, I mean, they couldn't go do
So
anything.
let's not confuse rezoning with subdivision.
Okay.
Two totally different things.
Good point, okay.
And
withdraw the question.
one forestalls the other typically, because you, let's just say, for example, there was an RR5 parcel and they wanted to make it R2, just for example.
Yeah.
Strictly
Yeah,
hypothetical.
that's what we're thinking, right, yeah.
So that would lead to more homes, and eventually they would want to subdivide that. So those more homes are going to have some impact on the roads, on the schools, on fire and rescue, and so that's the sort of thing that an impact might be identified and a proffer might be made. That's separate from, I'm going to proffer that I'll never put a gas station on this property.
But
Which is what we tend to see right now.
Without this ordinance, I'm doing the RR5 to RR2, and I don't, I want to make a proffer. Can I do that without this ordinance?
Well, they do it now,
I know.
and we have a different ordinance, and it has a different statement,
Yeah,
and where the tables could be really slanted against us if an applicant came forward and said, the county made me do this
yeah,
proffer,
well, that's what I was wondering, right.
and it's unreasonable. And they took it to court, and they convinced the judge, which is not easy, that the county really forced their hand, and just weren't gonna get this rezoning without providing this unreasonable proffer, the court overturns. And that's why people are jumping through circles to basically say, we're not in a game of recommending any proffer. It's up to you to identify impacts. It's up to you to identify mitigating matters to mitigate that impact, and you recommend both of them to us. And if we think you've done a good job, well, then your project might succeed. And if we don't, it won't. But it's not because we asked for something.
Great, yeah, great.
This is a newer change within like the last 15 years.
Yeah, it's 2018 is really when this started hitting. And it was, the pendulum swings. And the home builders were really getting hit with some huge proffers from cash proffers, $18,000, $19,000 per house. And they're saying this is really impacting the affordability of our homes. Now, there may have been a realistic nexus of that 19,000 because you build all these houses, you got to have a new elementary school, right? And so the pendulum swung way the other way with state code language that with this unreasonable thing. And the localities basically swung it the other way and said, fine, we're not doing any rezoning. And so it's come back towards the middle now.
Developers went to Richmond.
Yeah. Yeah. And we need houses in the Commonwealth for, the growth and economy goals and all that. They have to be in the right place, which generally means other places. So the whole process in this section is important. But just the staking our claim to the appropriate high growth allowances, that part needs to be cleaned up. But I think generally the requiring them to do the impact analysis as a justification for the proffers and the statement is the way we want to go. All right. Division 6 in this same, so throughout this article, let me just backtrack. So we're in Article 3, permits and applications. First, it's a upfront general, applies to all the different types of permits and applications. Then we have Division 2, zoning, text, and map amendments. There was some discussion. Virginia code does not require us to allow people to apply for text amendments. The Code of Virginia says the text amendment can happen on a motion of the Planning Commission, a resolution of the board, or a petition of a property owner. And so the petition of the property owner isn't required. The bodies, after talking about it, said, well, we'll do it until it presents itself to be an issue. We've only had a couple of these, 2 or 3 over the last 5 years, so it's not like a major issue. So this still includes all 3 avenues. So it just cleans it up a little bit in the process that you take. So that's zoning, text, and map amendments. And then 3 is a special kind of map amendment when you have conditional zoning, meaning proffers. 4 is special exceptions, everything that you just went through just now. 5 is variances. Then 6 is site plans. So that's the next area where there were some pretty big changes. I think it's still a little cumbersome. It includes all the stuff that's in our ordinance right now for major site plans, which is, I think, a little clunky. But I didn't want to change that. So one of the, an area of confusion now is when does a site plan need to be submitted? And in your use table, there's all the zoning districts across the top, and then the uses down the left side, and all the way over on the right, there's site plan, there's X's. Mm-hmm. So these particular uses require a site plan. But do you need, and we only have one flavor of site plan in our current ordinance, which is like the whole shoot and match engineered plans, curves, gutter, all that kinds of stuff. And there are some provisions say if it's certain things aren't needed, the zoning administrator, if it's administratively approvable, or the planning commission, if it goes through public hearing, can waive certain things. That's kind of cumbersome for some things. So right now, it would suggest that if you if you have a special exception that comes in for some future use, when do I need my full engineered site plan to be done? This, maybe $25,000 engineered plan for a use that I might or might not be able to do at all. I might come to a public hearing right here and see that everybody's just like, absolutely not. And they just spent 25 grand for an engineer to find out there's just no chance of them doing this project. So what this attempts to do is put in a tiered process. And so you have 3 types of plans. And they are laid out a little bit further down in 170-68 applicability. Again, everywhere we can, we've tied this back to Code of Virginia. So you have a sketch plan, lowest level of detail, and we'll go down a little bit lower to see what each one of these includes. So a sketch plan right now is identified for any development requiring a building permit in accordance to Chapter 71 that requires building permits, zoning map amendments, just regular old rezoning, and then special exceptions. So if you need to do these, you need a sketch plan. Okay. The next step up is a minor site plan. So if you do a minor site plan, if you have a development with land disturbance exceeding 10,000 square feet. Once you cross 10,000 square feet, you're already in the game of erosion sediment control plan. And you have to do an engineered plan anyway to show your silt fence and all that stuff. And so we'll jump you in. You have to do this plan. Once you do your E&S, we're going to make you do some other things at the same time. A change in use where additional parking is required. So I was a barber shop and now I'm a restaurant. We want to see how are you going to fit these cars. Any development that would have substantial impact on traffic on any connecting road. This is subjective, and the zoning administrator has to make this determination. So I was a certain kind of restaurant that required 20 parking spots, but now I have a drive-through, which is going to be a big difference on traffic coming and going. And then any zoning map amendment that increases residential density. So a zoning map amendment just by itself is a sketch plan, even at this early stage. But if you are increasing residential density, then we want to see a minor site plan. Okay. Then the next category is basically what we have now called a major site plan. So it's based, it links back, and so if 2 or more of those things that trigger a minor site plan apply, then you are in a major. Or a development with land disturbance exceeding 1 acre, and once you exceed 1 acre, then you have to do a DEQ stormwater management plan and much more stormwater management documents. That's all engineered anyway. A development that requires connection to public water or sewer. We're going to want to see where the public water sewer runs and all that stuff. And any development that includes construction of public roads, sidewalks, or fire hydrants. So if you are actually developing a public road, which we don't do here very often, but our road requirements basically say if you have more than 6 homes, you have to build it to public road standards so that it can be taken into state code. And all of our private roads that we have now, they were done before those requirements were put in place. And we don't want a lot of private roads that then cause problems later on. And so that's basically why this is in here. And major requires a lot of different things which are down below. So, notwithstanding the requirements of this section, these 3 different, the zoning administrator can increase or decrease the requirements for site case-by-case issue. And the administrator can waive requirements for additions to existing building structures. So if you just put in a little addition, you need a building permit, but maybe the specific issue, circumstances in your circumstance or can be reviewed as you're adding a 2nd floor or something really is not impacting the ground, things can be reduced. Then D, this is supposed to make it clear that this is an iterative process, can be, and you might have had to do a sketch plan during your special exception That doesn't even get you out of doing a minor site plan when it comes to seeking your zoning permit when you're gonna disturb 10,000 square feet. You still have to jump through the hoops. It's just in order, and we're not gonna make you do the big thing up front before you even know if you're allowed to do it. So then, in general requirements, so you can see 170 to 70 is talking about what is in a sketch plan. And so all these, the sketch plan, minor and major, what's required, that's subject to being tweaked as seen, thought to be best by the planning commission, public, et cetera, open for input. So we need the property lines. That's pretty important because we need to know if you have your minimum yards, aka setbacks, taken care of. And so this, you see blue, I added this. Existing zoning district boundaries, including overlay districts on the property to be developed and immediately adjacent properties. Many of our setbacks are dependent on your zoning district and your neighbor's zoning district. So is it commercial next to residential? The setback is one thing. If it's commercial next to commercial, it's something else. So we want to see that. Abutting streets with name and route numbers, general location of buildings. So again, how are you going to know whether it meets the setbacks unless you know where the buildings are? And it's supposed to be generally scaled, but this can be, take your plat, draw them, scale things off, put them on there, print out Google Maps, easy to accomplish for a typical citizen. And then where your road entrances and whatnot are. Topography at 5 feet, that's online, it's in the flood maps, anybody can print it off. And then additional information is deemed reasonably necessary by the administrator, so case-by-case basis, which is really belts and suspenders because it says that up higher too.
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Well, you mentioned generally to scale, but I don't see anything that says that. Obviously, general location, is subject to interpretation. I could sort of, and we've seen some of those. I wonder where that idea of some level of scaling. I mean, I know it's hard to define it, but
Yeah, and so it doesn't say that, but we would turn it back and say, well, your house is in the middle, it's not on the side. If we can come up with words that would provide the flexibility, what most people are going to do is they're going to take an aerial image, which is going to show their home. They're going to draw a box over where the house is.
Right.
And then they're going to show, well, this is where the garage is going. And then we're going to look at the lot lines. And it's meant to be relatively simple for relatively simple circumstances. And so that's important, is input to when is it required? And is it required for the appropriate types of things? And that earlier section might want to be modified to make this an option less often, more often.
well, I mean, it seems like most of what we deal with would be in this category.
Most of the time. I mean, most of the time, we're not doing over 10,000 square feet. I think it's between this and the minor. For a tourist home, I would argue whether that use has an X in the column at all, right? I mean, do you really need a site plan for a tourist home? There's probably certain, you got to have parking, it can't be in the front yard, whatever these certain things are, you might not need a plan to show that. But maybe you want, I don't know.
And maybe for some tourist homes, but not for others.
Maybe, yeah.
Like the one that was 5 houses on the one property, it might have been housed.
Yeah, exactly, and that's an instance, where I think, you can ultimately require through the special exception process anything you want. The way you're set up right now, when the code was changed, is that once a complete application comes in, public hearing, right, automatic. And that's try to, I guess, to speed things up. But that has a little bit of a detriment in what you heard tonight is like, oh, I just heard about this thing. We're already doing this. But the saving grace is you're making a recommendation to the board. It's very rare that you would have a joint public hearing with the board for a tourist home or something like that. So immediately going to public hearing, you can then require additional information before you make a decision if there was something that didn't sit right. You've heard from the public, you can gather more information and then assimilate all that and then make a recommendation. And that's where things slow back down before the board ultimately makes a decision, which most of the folks that are here tonight probably didn't understand that this is step one of a two-part process.
Right.
And maybe our letter notices can do a better job for that.
But it does seem like this gives us some latitude in requiring different kinds of plans, which I like, because we do, I mean, I think we have gotten mostly tourist home applications for the last several years, but there was a time when we had quite a few cell tower applications as well.
Right,
And
so that's a
that
good
allows
point.
us a higher level of detail for those kinds of applications.
So that's likely gonna be more than 10,000 square feet, but it might be in the earlier section for minor site plan, you would say telecommunication facility.
Yeah, I think we need to add that.
Yeah.
I do. Because that is an article of great interest when they come up, and people are going to want to see that in greater detail. I'm going to want to see it in greater detail.
But following up on that point, even if we didn't change it, we would have the right upon receiving that
You could.
application to.
That's right.
To
step it up.
require that additional level, yes.
And so would the administrator, right? But if it's a situation where, from a uniformity perspective, it just makes sense for, they're gonna do engineered plans anyway.
Right.
For their sites. Whether they exceed 10,000 square feet or not, they're gonna do it. So it's not that much of a burden to require them to do an engineered plan, which is when you get into the.
Yeah, and I think utility scale renewable energy would probably be in that same.
You're into a major because of, you're
That's
over
gonna
an acre,
get you there.
right? You're over an acre easy, you know, in that process. So minor steps things up, contemplates more of a engineered set of plans. And it basically requires much more detail. A lot of the same things, you know, the zoning district and boundaries and all that. Topography at 2-foot intervals instead of 5, which is standard for an engineered set of plans. Trying to think, I think the scale. Water courses, waterways, wetlands, lakes, blah, blah, blah. Minimum yards, topography. Access, ENS plan, floodplain limits. Documentation of all existing permits, any special exceptions, any rezonings. I thought we had a scale on there, but I don't see it.
Well, it is 2 feet.
Yeah, but a map scale, 1 inch to 100 feet. That's in the major one. So this is intermediate, but considers that you will have engineered plans. That you probably do definitely need. Plan scale. Which is in major, so I made a note of that. And also, so any proffers that are on the property from past rezonings. So this list, you know, it can be modified. This is, these are options. And so these are kind of plucked out of this major, which is what is in our current code. And it's just this very long list of things that you need to do. 4 was in, was missing, had that in. Road data, curve data, all these, because anytime you have new roads, so maybe if you don't have any new roads, then that wouldn't apply, but. So I'm not sure the best way to nail down this super long list. So here's this, this is a 50 feet to the inch for the scale. All this stuff is in your ordinance now. We don't ever do it because we don't ever require a full detailed site plan. We almost never have that kind of development.
still trying to get my head around the when question, because when you brought up when before, I now think you were not really referring to what point in the process, but more which set of conditions. And I guess I'm still, I feel like we've gotten stuck on this a little bit, like, well, is this the right time to have a site plan? Or would we approve it now, conditional upon eventually having a look at the site plan? How does that aspect of timing fit in?
So I think a typical concept project that is over an acre of disturbed land, and maybe it's a subdivision with more than 3 lots, so it's a common plan of development in the eyes of DEQ, so you have to consider it all together. It's over an acre. You have to do stormwater management. And maybe that is subject to a rezoning that increases the density of the parcel. Right? So they come in for the rezoning, and that rezoning process is going to require a minor site plan. Show me how you're going to lay this site out in medium detail. Then they say, okay. Then they come in, they get their subdivision plan, then they want to go build the project. We say, great, you're allowed to build the project. Submit your major site plan because your disturbance is over an acre. And once you get an approved major site plan, then we'll give you your zoning permits and off you go.
But the difference in those is the planning commission, for example, is not involved in that second step.
They are now, and I believe you would be in the future.
Because of what would trigger it if they've already gotten the zoning?
The site plan process is a separate application.
It's its own
fee.
application thing.
Yeah. It gets jumbled now.
Yeah, so it's hard to, that's why I'm having a hard time unpacking it, because it's such a big blob of nothingness now. I don't quite, it's hard to see what would replace that exactly.
Yeah, and so another example
We
might
might
be.
need some more of these scenarios.
So in Sperryville, where we had the brewery right on 211 near the curb, they wanted a special exception to do that use. So for the special exception, immediately would be a sketch plan. You could require more or less. Until they're actually ready to do the project, they wouldn't necessarily need an engineered plan. But they definitely would in that situation, whether the disturb did or did not disturb more than 10,000 square feet, all the parking would trigger them into requiring that minor site
To come. So,
and if it was over an acre, then it would trigger them to the major.
So one of the ones that we dealt with recently that was a little complex, and we went through things, was the Blue Rock. That one, I think that we had several decisions, but they were all interconnected.
So I think, I would think about it in this perspective. In the decision-making relative to Blue Rock, is it important for you to know with a level of precision that the building is going to be here on an engineered scale drawing and the topography is exactly like this every 2 feet? Or is it important for you to know that the event venue is going to be over here, the entrance is here, people are going to park there?
Yes.
That's really the level of information that is critical for that special exception process. And as you're going through that, you might say, I need a little bit more detail, and you can work on that to get the more detail. But I don't think you need an engineered plan drawn exactly to scale for you to decide that an event venue for 500 or 200 people is good or bad for the site, is appropriate for the site. Well, when they go to build it, that's when they would have to meet that before they get their zoning permit.
And just, so essentially what we ended up kind of teasing out of that process was something that was about like this minor site plan, it seems like.
It was probably less. It was probably a sketch plan. They submitted their plans, they showed kind of the box where the barn was going to go. And then they showed you detailed pretty pictures of what the barn was going to look like, the event barn.
Yeah.
And they showed you generally where the 3 new residential, whatever buildings were going to be. but not on a plan that was, 1 inch equals 100 with, 2-foot contours and all this stuff that is needed before they actually do the work.
And right now, because we've had our action and our code doesn't require this stuff, they wouldn't come back to us for any of that.
Well, if they'll have to do erosion sediment control plan, which is scaled.
But they wouldn't come to us with
They
that.
wouldn't come to you.
So, in this process, they still,
Well,
I'm
and
now
so,
trying to pull out this.
so our
site
process
plan
right
as
now, it's bifurcated. If a use has a P in the use matrix, the site, all that, everything's administrative. And if it has an SE, it goes to you.
So, carrying that scenario forward under this set of rules, that application running through this process, that site plan would eventually come back to us because it's
Yeah,
based on the site.
that's what your
special
ordinance says
exception.
now. I can tell you, in my former locality, once, the special exception process is basically akin to deciding whether that use in that parcel should get a zoning permit, right? And you have special rules in order to allow you to get a zoning permit. Once that process is done, our elected and appointed people weren't involved anymore. Now, we had a lot bigger staff. And then all of we had 10 different departments reviewing a site plan based on the zoning, based on the public utilities, based on the building and accessible routes.
I understand that,
and all that.
but I think what's different here is because of the view shed natural disruption is so much more that is highly dependent. I think why we have such a heavy dependence on special exception that I feel like we've kind of pushed a lot of that stuff into that front process. And it's not quite like it comes down to how does the site, fit the surrounding area and the agricultural space. I don't feel completely comfortable with
So
that
for a
concept.
special exception, the bodies might say, you need to have screening on the west side
Right.
as a condition of your special exception, but then there's follow-through on what does that actually
does that
look
look
like
like?
in the site plan, and should the planning commission then be reviewing that specificity?
To say
And that's
good
fine,
enough.
and if that's how the body would want it to be, we just need to make sure the words reflect that.
Well, I guess that's what I was asking was as written, do the words currently reflect that?
I
You
can't,
don't think?
I couldn't tell you right
Yeah.
now, I have to go read them again.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I think
Yeah.
from what I was reading, it doesn't preclude us from doing what we've always done, which was like, for example, on that Sperryville Brewery property, I remember Al said, I think your main problem is gonna be parking, and you have to really prove to us that you can park all of the cars that you say you can park there in the way you're going to plan the
Yeah,
property.
they came back with an engineered
And
plan
he
for the
came
parking
back-
lot.
And then he came back with an engineer plan for the parking lot. So I think it's got enough definitions, but also enough flexibility that we can concentrate on the areas of concern.
Yeah, so it wouldn't by default come back to us, but it could, if we wished for it because of conditions like, well, the screening design here is very important to us, therefore we would like you to come back with that screening design. Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
So that, the procedural pathway language probably could be kind of sussed out a little bit more.
You
Yeah.
could do it that way, or you could just require the more detailed plan immediately. I mean, that, for something like the Blue Rock, I mean, they're gonna have to do it anyway, right? So why not present it to the planning?
Well, and that's because, if I'm the Blue Rock and I've got a limited amount of money, I don't want to spend 20 grand if it's gonna be a maybe. Or if it's gonna be probably not, but I'm gonna take a shot. And so that's what we're trying to allow somebody to give you their concept and let you decide whether the concept makes sense. It might not at all. And then they don't have to waste their money, and you don't have to go through, minutia of things that wouldn't have mattered anyway in the big picture decision.
Yeah, that reminds me of the application for the food pantry over on the the less desirable lot
Bank
over
Road.
by the bank, and not a will to do the stormwater mitigation, and that ultimately was the demise of that application.
Yeah, that was,
So,
there's the stream protection overlay district that applies only in certain districts and applied in that, which made the parcel, not much left of the parcel when you're all said and
very
done.
challenging parcel.
I think the problem I'm having getting my head around this is, you're talking about this as though it's sort of staged, but we only have one bite at the apple, generally.
Well,
We either approve the
you
special-
have had one bite at the apple, and I guess what we're saying is that they should be, sequential.
Yes, there should be some
And
way
so,
for us, but sequential, yes, but also, I understand we don't want someone to spend $25,000 before they know we're okay with the concept, but then once we're okay with the concept, or they've gotten general improvement, the increment doesn't really help if they don't come back to us with anything else that we might care about. And that's the thing.
well, I mean, coming back to is the details, and so if the planning commission wants to be involved in those details, as the code says you are now, for
site plan.
for site plans that aren't administratively approvable because they have a P, right? Then, if you want to be involved, then you are, right? And so we can make sure the wording is clear that way, but the special exception is, that is not supposed to be, that is debated, that's the fairly debatable standard that we've heard about. Maybe it's appropriate, maybe it's not, yes or no, depending on a lot of things. Once you get to the site plan, it's really supposed to be, if you check the correct boxes that we've asked you to check, then you get to do it. We've already told you can do it. You just have to make sure you follow all of our rules and put the bushes in the right places and keep the parking lot in the right spot and actually do the 15 parking spots we asked you for and all of those things. And once you have an approved site plan, that's good for 5 years. That's state code. Now, special exception doesn't get you 5 years. And if you don't advance and do that site plan eventually, you might lose your special exception earlier. But once you have an approved special exception, it's 5 years. And oh, by the way, recently the General Assembly has been keen in extending that further and further. First it was the downturn in 2009, and then now it's the pandemic, and they keep saying, if you have a valid special exception, or a valid site plan, it continues to be valid, or a subdivision plan. It continues to be valid, and they keep pushing it out and out and out.
And those are all validated by administrative action.
Generally, but many localities do have a planning commission be the final approval authority for that site plan.
Okay.
And so I would think that staff would be working on the details and going back and forth with the applicant, getting their site plan and form ready for consideration by the planning commission, who would ultimately approve. In Gloucester, I had to sign it as the deputy county administrator for that side of the house after all of the departments made all their comments and everything was filtered together, that the trees that the zoning wanted weren't sitting on top of the utility line that utility wanted. Everything was meshed together, and then it was approved. That was all done by staff.
Yeah, I guess what and it may be here, and I'm just not seeing it, is that kind of interplay between the stages and.
Yeah, and I think maybe we just need to suss out that process.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it's here, but that's important to me.
Yeah, because what goes on with the site plan really affects how it sits in the county. I mean, it seems like something we'd want to have.
And so then, the step after the site plan is, okay, now, do what you said you were gonna do.
Yeah, right.
So our most recent site plan, I think, was for the by right in building across from Quickie Mart. Okay, so we got the site, first pulling teeth to get the site plan, had to bring everybody together and talk about it because it was complex with different personalities. And so we finally got an approval site plan that had to be reviewed for erosion sediment control by the Culpeper Soil and Water Conservation District and had to be reviewed by VDOT for the entrance, and then had to meet, you know, zoning for setbacks and the health department for where's the leach field going and everything. So we got everybody together, finally got an approved site plan. And then they didn't do it, you know? They built a road around the back, and they're like, wait a minute, time out. Here's the approved plan you said you were gonna do, you have to do this. And they went back and undid stuff, fixed it, and got back to it. And some people around here are
But that was an
used to
example.
doing this process because we don't do commercial development.
Yeah, but that was an example where that didn't,
That was a by right
okay, so it didn't come
use
to us.
in a commercial
because of the by
general
right.
zone district.
But if that had been under a special exception.
It would have had to come
it would
to
have had to
you.
come back to
Yeah.
us. Okay. That's really the piece that I'm trying to figure
And
out.
so we need to make sure that is clear
Yeah.
in this process. And so when it is, in either case, right now, the planning commission or the zoning administrator can waive certain requirements from our zoning, or from our site plan, this long list of things. Like,
Yeah.
okay, you don't need curb and gutter because there's no curb and gutter, right? And so that depends. The zoning administrator can do it for administrative, and the planning commission can do it for those things that go through the planning commission.
I think
That's
that's the
similar
intent.
here, but, so we'll nail down the process on the sequential nature of some of these, and then confirm on who approves what when,
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful.
right?
Great.
So at any rate, I think we're getting better on site.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting what they were doing in Fauquier County last week. I guess anything over 5,000 square feet is now a special exception, if I read it right.
I didn't see that. 5,000, oh, building size or something?
Mm-hmm. It seems to be the direction that they're heading.
Is this the data, like a data center?
I think it's.
board?
I think ultimately it's to slow the
'Cause these-
growth and the data center.
No one ever imagined a building
happenings
that
in,
big.
in Vint Hill, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean,
particularly.
shopping, I don't know. I guess you could do that.
It's just something that they did, I think, to try to
Yeah.
pump the brakes.
Yeah. Interesting. I'll have to go look at that. Sounds interesting. All right, site plans. Division 8, so division, that was 6. 7 is just your run-of-the-mill zoning permits, right? We need these things, they're important. That's 170, 78.
Gary, where's your blue line draft? Because that wasn't what I pulled off.
It's the one that says GWC edit on it. There's 2 files, so it's the second one. Where's the first one? So it's the first one on here, on BoardDocs. So you might have seen the file name is very similar.
There's this one, where most of your track changes just say deleted, 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 deleted. And then there is Gary edits.
Yeah.
And it does not have your blue line in there.
I'm looking at it right now, so I don't know if you can see the file name that I'm looking at. I can go back and see if there's some,
The GWC edit,
yeah, that's what's on the screen.
okay, the GWC edit is this document here.
Uh-huh.
And your red line does not have the blue that you have.
Correct. The red line is
Okay.
full of all kinds of colors.
It's
It does
got
not have my
yellow.
changes.
Comments.
Correct.
Okay, so it's hard for me to follow when what you've got up there is, this would be what you've got up there.
This is what I'm looking at. But for whatever reason, this is not printed the same way. And there's no data concept in front of it.
That's what was on the actual formula from BoardDocs.
Yeah. The table of contents credits weight and hold.
This is BoardDocs.
Yeah, the one I printed seemed to have it, but I don't remember which one. I pulled up the one that had the blue.
you go back and look?
So just for example, just what's the bottom page number on that, page 29?
Yeah. This literally, I clicked on the link in BoardDocs just now. Are we good?
Yeah, thanks.
Excellent. I'm gonna jump back to just Acrobat file, it's easier for me to deal with. All right, zoning permits. So, today, you must have a zoning permit to get a building permit, if and only if you disturb the ground or require VDH permits. I don't know why our ordinance says that. But there are many situations where there's a change in use where we should probably be looking at this. And, you know, the use of the building goes from a residential and all of a sudden it's a business. Maybe it's, you know, Main Street in Sperryville where businesses are allowed by right. But there might be certain requirements that go along with that business, hairstyling. All of a sudden they've gone from a 200 amp panel to a 600 amp panel. Somebody ought to pay attention to what's going on there. Probably growing something. So we've tried to set this up now to make it more clear when zoning permits are required. And this is important to think about, you know, when is the right time. So the following must receive a zoning permit prior to commencing any activity, construction, use, or otherwise. So establishment, construction, expansion, improvement, or exterior alteration of any structure larger than 100 square feet of ground area. So maybe you got a shed or something. Maybe 100 is the right number, maybe it's not the right number. We don't want to be burdened by every little tiny thing, but we don't want to deal with swing sets and, I mean, just accessory use by right. We don't want to be issuing zoning permits for your bird bath, right? But certain things we do, you know, somebody should be, the owner's taking some liability that they're building their 100 square foot whatever in the side yard exclusion area. And then, you know, their neighbor's gonna complain, and then we're gonna find, oh, no, you're not allowed to do that there, and then you gotta tear it down or move it. So there's some benefit here to the citizen. It is a pain, but it's some benefit. So you need it. So prior to establishing a new use or change in an existing use, if minor or major site plan is required. So if you had to go through a site plan process, as we talked about before, then you definitely need a zoning permit. And that's kind of obvious. Health department approval is required, which is in the current code. A building permit for a new or changed use is required. That is new. That's not required today. And so this new or changed use. And so if you're going from a residential to some commercial use, if you're going from a certain kind of commercial use and now you're going to maybe a retail type use where a lot of people are going to be coming and going. And the building official has to go through a change in use process to make sure the doors are adequate for the number of people that are in there and all that stuff. Then we ought to review it for zoning to make sure whatever you're planning to do in there, you're allowed to do there. And then a land disturbance a permit is required, which you're triggered at 10,000 square feet. Most of the time here, that's for residents.
But, are there some special exception uses that would not require a minor or major site plan?
Yes.
Then this would suggest that you don't need a zoning permit even if you need a special exception permit.
Right.
Is that what we want?
Well,
isn't a special exception permit kind of a type of zoning?
No.
No, they're completely,
It's a special exception is basically bending the requirements to allow you to do something where you're not otherwise allowed to do. It's kind of like a variance. But
It's an alternative to a zoning permit.
it is
kind
a
of,
prerequisite
because you're
that
not-
we would generally view to a zoning permit, so maybe we should lay that out. We require zoning permits now,
Right.
even though we're not.
My concern, the thing that I'm picking up on is that what would ordinarily, it seemed, catch special exceptions would be too small I, but if you could have a special exception that doesn't require one of those, it almost implies that
Tourist
you
home.
don't need
Tourist home.
you don't need a zoning permit to do that, which I don't think is the intent.
Yeah, you might get caught up in a change of use. But
Only
you're
if-
right.
But only if the change of use, only if a minor or major site plan is required.
Yeah.
So I think that's I think there's. I think the point generally is, what's the relationship between the zoning permit and the special exception permit? I mean, is that-
Special exception identifies the conditions that you need, the special exception identifies the conditions necessary to make the use compatible with by right uses. By right uses need a zoning permit just for confirmation that you checked all the boxes. Special exception attaches conditions generally to make that use compatible with those by right uses. And so the special exception process is for you to consider, identify impacts, place conditions on this use that might be okay in some places and not in other places to make it okay. Once you establish those conditions, then you got a new set of rules that the applicant must follow, not the standard rules for zoning. So zoning plus conditions upon which a zoning permit would be issued and measured.
So, I think you're saying, if you have a special exception, you would still require a zoning.
I think that would be a good idea, and it would be good to add to the list.
And then you wouldn't have to worry about the major minor sending you back that way. In other words, you have to know which one is sending you to the special exception line. Anyway, I'm not. being
Yeah, so
super
the
clear.
general process is, I want to do this thing. Look at the zoning ordinance. Am I allowed to do this thing?
Only if I.
No.
Yeah.
But you have an opportunity through a special exception, all right? Try to get my special exception. The answer is yes, but you have to follow these 3 special rules. You're back up here, say, okay, now it's yes. Okay, well, how much disturbance do I have? What is the impact? How do I get from here to building my thing? I need a zoning permit. Oh, I can't get a zoning permit until my site plan is done to show exactly how this thing is going to be built. I do that a year from now. I do my site plan, I get the engineering done, I get it approved, the planning commission approves it, I put that on the shelf for 3 years. Okay, 3 years, the economy turns around, I'm ready to build my thing, and I come to you, I get my zoning permit, it's only good for 6 months, and off I go. So we think about these things all stacked up on top of each other, but they might be spread out over 6 years.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And so
That's
some of that
why-
process
That's an argument
can be
for
can go into that sussing out.
Yes, I think so. I think that's.
I mean, I had a room full of site plans. Some were done, others were sitting there. Maybe they're gonna be done some year, every once in a while you gotta cull through them and say, oh, these are more than 5 years old, no longer valid. But I do agree that if your use requires special exception, then we should require a zoning permit to validate that the application at the end of the pipe, the zoning permit kind of tied with a building permit, that what is happening in the field actually meets those conditions.
Yeah.
And then 3 is, you should need a zoning permit if you're doing extractive, you're digging a sand pit, right? Something like that, where you're not building anything. So B gets too kind of discussive. We can't issue a zoning permit unless the use meets a special exception or variance, et cetera, but we need to tie that off.
Yeah,
better
yeah,
in the list
that's
above.
kind of getting it.
Yep. And so then D, this is in our code now, and Ms. Smith knows this come up here recently. No zoning permit unless we get a permit from the RCWSA saying they've issued a permit. And when site plans are required, then that site plan should thread everybody together. And the sewer authority should be reviewing the site plan parallel with this. And the fact that we almost never do these, means we probably need better check lists for these sort of things. So as I just said a minute ago, period of validity, these are 6 months, so that's a state code thing. And consistent with building permits, and they can be extended. So after zoning permits is temporary zoning permits. Right now, the only type of temporary zoning permit that we really have listed are for mobile homes in those situations when there's a building permit open to fix a damaged house. And this, we talked about last time, is now expanded to include camping trailers in that same very limited situation. So if you have a building permit, and I clarified that in my addition, a temporary zoning permit will be issued only to applicants who hold a valid building permit to construct, reconstruct, or model their intended permanent dwelling located on the same parcel. The temporary zoning permit will be immediately revoked upon issuance of final occupancy for the permanent dwelling. So my house catches on fire, and I need to rebuild my house. I can live on my property in a camping trailer.
So I'm sorry, just want to clarify, you're reading something that is now not quite in this.
No, it's in B5.
I see.
And so that's basically what this is all about. We did a lot of this in Gloucester because of recurrent flooding. House gets flooded, they gotta do something, you bring in a trailer and live in the FEMA trailer for a little while. Mobile homes are not easy to move around.
Yeah.
But it's clear that it's not really and, it's or. You get the camping trailer or you get the permanent home. And once your home has got your CO, the other one's gone.
Sounds good.
So zoning determinations, this attempts to nail down process a little bit better than what we have right now. My big change in this in D was to, rather than have wording that the wording that the Berkeley group put in there tried to explain what the state code language was relative to adjacent property owner notification, and I just put the state code language in it.
Makes sense.
This is one that was discussed, I think maybe just by the Board of Supervisors, I can't remember. This might be an avenue where the Planning Commission might also want some other notification in addition to what is required by state code. This is what's required by state code. The only time an adjacent property owner notification is required is under this paragraph D, period. Now, we talked, it would be very cumbersome to do adjacent property owner notifications for every little determination or interpretation. But there could be an online listing of them or something like that. So that's something that the commission could think about, not in here. That is there some other way you want the world to know what determinations are happening by the zoning administrator? And then otherwise it's just aligning the wording, this tax assessment books and records. that shows up in the state code. So rather than say county real estate assessment records, let's put the words that are in the code just to.
I'm sorry, where are those words?
Yeah, that's an E,
In, under which section?
the same, 17084.
84E, okay.
I think it shows up a couple times, actually.
Okay.
All right. And so if you're, if you want a determination, it also, and I didn't change this much, this isn't just gonna be, hey, Michelle, I'd like, what do you think about this? You're gonna tell us who you are, where you live, and what exactly you want.
I'm sorry.
I don't think there's anything else that falls into that category of really differing from what
So-
we have now.
A zoning determination is independent of a zoning permit. That would be something that's more advisory. I mean, that's.
So the Code of
Is it
Virginia,
official?
15.2.2286A4 says the zoning administrator is empowered to interpret the zoning ordinance. And oh, by the way, if somebody asks you to do that, you have to answer them within 90 days.
Okay.
So you're compelled to do this thing. And so it tries to put a little bit of structure around that process of what is a request, what you need to do to have a request, and then it regurgitates
So then
the
the
90
next
days.
question is, what, if the zoning administrator has interpreted the ordinance pursuant to that request, shouldn't the adjacent property owners know what that determination is?
Yeah, and so the Code of Virginia says in paragraph D, yes, in a certain circumstance. And my message is that this is a huge continuum from, what does this little term mean to something that could be very impactful. And having to send letters to adjacent property owners for every single thing might not be worth our time. But having some sort of online repository or something that anybody can go look at any time to see what is that person up to now, they can do it. They can go look anytime they want. The newspaper can look every week and publish all the determinations that were done if they wanted to. I think that's
We
easier.
get a lot of requests for determination?
No, well, in this framework, it would be reduced because there's this gate you have to go through. You have to
Right.
actually ask for it.
Right.
But now there's all the time people, what does residence mean? Things like that just constantly happening.
And then eventually they come in and say, well, I was told.
Yeah.
This,
So that's,
this is getting the I was told out of the conversation.
formalizes it a
it
little
tries
The
to.
attempt.
Tries to. And it also makes it clear that when a determination is made, then it'll include the right to appeal language as required by the other section and tell them how to appeal and the fee and all that stuff, and it formalizes.
Well, there is an
What about
opportunity.
if the determination, in addition to D, could impact the adjacent property owners, then there should be notice.
Yeah, it's a super subjective
Not that subjective.
impact. I mean, in what way? Like, I don't like seeing
Well, like
houses.
in the way of a 50-foot right-of-way to no right-of-way.
Yeah.
I think.
So
all the
my
people
message
here-
to you is, you can include whatever words in here you think reflect what the citizens would want to see and that are manageable by staff, and then have a public hearing. I would just ask you to be careful for wanting every single thing to be pushed out. Now, if the gate to get through to actually get a determination is somewhat torturous, and you actually, if you really want this thing, you have to apply, and there may be a fee, and there's, you gotta make sure you tell me all these things, And there probably won't be as many, it would be easier to just say, okay, we'll tell adjacent properties. Or if
But
it's,
people will just do what they want to do.
or is it, what does kennel mean? And who's the neighbor for what does kennel mean? Anybody who has a kennel, anybody who might have a kennel, just the person who asked about a particular site for a kennel? And it's not as simple as just saying, well, just tell the neighbors.
Okay, let me think about it.
Yeah, but I mean, hey, well, I'm open. I want to be transparent. I just don't want to be burdensome in, the day-to-day work.
Yeah, I mean, you want some dialogue and some ability to interpret in some way, but
And we're
when
compelled
does that cross
right?
to a formal
And
determination?
that's why I think a way to be perfectly transparent is if we do one of these things, put it online. Just have a list.
Well, and in the agenda every month.
Or in the
board.
planning commission, every planning commission, there can be a section, zoning determinations.
Right, update.
But timeliness, there is, and is, discussed about this other case, you get 30 days if you're aggrieved to do something about it. And so
But you have to know about it.
putting them on the website will, everybody is allowed to see whatever happens.
So a zoning determination necessarily attaches to an individual parcel. It's not, it doesn't apply to somebody generally getting an interpretation of the zoning ordinance.
It can't, so anybody can ask anything.
Right.
What I have read is that unless it attaches to a particular use and parcel, it doesn't,
not a determination.
it doesn't have the force of law
Yeah.
with it. And that came up in this last thing because, Mr. Taylor came in and said, here, I said, can't do it, And, but then I wrote and I said, listen, unless there's an application and you actually ask for a decision, there's no precedent, there's no determination made, and there's nothing to appeal.
Yeah, I mean,
And you can't just appeal a general discussion about a hypothetical, can I do
does
kennels
this
and
mean
ag?
generally this? Yeah, I mean, I think that is a good distinction, that a determination that is
So the
formal.
state code doesn't say that, but case law has gotten there. That's how I understand the situation. So I don't know that we put anything in the ordinance that is, that it's not tethered to state code. It's just that if people ask for a determination on some concept, we might either, in our response, it probably would say something, is we can't give you a determination on the
Is
concept.
zoning determination in the definition section somewhere?
I think it was added, yeah.
That's an important.
Well, that was a question I asked last time, and I haven't got to the definitions now because they're in the end, so I don't know.
Get some popcorn.
We asked for it to be in there.
Z, so it's the end of the
Oh,
end.
man, it's gonna be a long time before we get to that one.
Yeah.
Well, that would be important.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep. So that about gets us through to we really just high level stuff here. But,
What do we have on the board agenda this month for the evening?
we have, just such a, there's one thing.
Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't see it earlier.
That's because I just sent it before this meeting. So far. The sign ordinance. Kind of starting to talk about the 5
Yeah.
co-opted into 6 main things.
And then I would just ask maybe that we go ahead, if it's agreeable to everyone here tonight, and just send this working copy up to the board so they can see where we are with this.
Not that it's endorsed or not endorsed,
No.
but just
But just
status.
feedback welcome. Are we on the right track? Are you seeing things you don't want to see, or not seeing things you do want to see? I always think that that's a fruitful conversation to have, and not that we'll have an on-the-spot answer, But I do think it is fair to have an ongoing conversation.
I agree.
Well, the most important thing is if there are non-starters for anything. I think we've talked about a lot of the concepts
Right.
jointly, and I think we've gotten out of, around the non-starter issues, but there's the fun, getting the details worked out is still a lot of work there.
Yes. So that's where I was with these kind of things we've not done before and decided to develop this language to make sure that we were on the right track and not spinning our wheels. And thank you very much, Gary, for working through those with us this evening.
So the next meeting is, I haven't got my head around the recommendation of the Berkeley group. I haven't read it. Right now, your Article 6, the special requirements for special exceptions for like 17066K, that whole list of things, 10 to 20 acres and all that for tourist homes and type 2 roads and tourist homes. All of those things only apply to special exceptions. None of those things apply to the same use in a zoning district where it's allowed by right today, which is interesting. The way this is restructured based on the diagnostic and the recommendations is that all of those become use regulations for the uses, whether they're by right or a special exception. And that's going to take a real close eye. I haven't looked at any of that before now because it wasn't in Article 1, 2, 3, or 9. And some things just won't make sense, maybe. And so we're going to have to really think about how that lays out correctly. But I do think there's a lot of things that we think are important for a tourist home on a 1 acre lot, but then when it shows up in village residential, but when it shows up in village commercial, are magically not important.
Yeah.
And probably should be. And we've had those by right recently in Sperryville. So, there probably are some use regulations that should attach to a by right use that has similar ones. Like a school, you need to have X square feet of play area for your kids when you get a special exception. But if, and I can't remember right now, maybe by right they're allowed in commercial general and we wouldn't care about how much play area you have for a kid.
So this would only apply to any of those use rows that have an SE in them somewhere.
Yeah, right now, today, that is what the case is. And some of them have a.
Well, but I mean, I'm sorry, consideration of whether that works would only apply to those uses that have special exceptions, which is a lot of them.
Which would apply to one that has a P and an SE.
Right.
Permitted in commercial general,
If it only has a
special
P,
exception
then
in
it
ag. Right? And in many cases, there are certain things that we want to do, requirements that we want to have on the parcel in ag to make it okay when it's generally just okay in commercial general. But that's not always the case. So I just say that that's going to take a lot of thought. Next time.
Well, and I mean, just off the top of my head, I think it's in addition to the permits that now you're requesting, the zoning permits, that you're having those requirements as well as the zoning permits for changes in use.
Yeah.
Even if they're permitted by right.
Yes, and I think that's very important.
I mean, it's really raising the bar on property owners in those zoning districts.
It can in some cases, and we don't want to, many times there's not a change in use. You go from one restaurant to another restaurant, something like that. It's not going to require that, even if they're doing renovations inside, changing out the kitchen. But if you're going from a restaurant to a beauty salon, then maybe it does matter.
Interesting.
And based on the amount of parking you should have, or the number of clientele you're going to have.
Oh, I know all about the parking one. That's a big one. All right, anyone have anything additional this evening for discussion? Next regular meeting is April 17th. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, and a second? Second. Thank you, Ms. Ritter. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye.